I used to believe that land remembers who loved it, that if you walked the same rows of apple trees for 40 years, if you buried a husband beneath the old oak at the edge of the pasture, if you paid every property tax bill on time, and kept the deeds in a fireproof box like a good nurse keeps medical charts organized dated, Persiseth and the land would stay loyal. I was wrong. From the small basement window, one Leo said, would be cozier for you, Mom. Less stairs to worry about. I watched my son hammer a polished wooden sign into the soil my late husband had tilled with his own hands. Upscale wedding venue opening soon. Tiffany stood beside him in white linen, pointing, correcting, adjusting the angle as if she were directing a photo shoot. The late afternoon sun caught her diamond ring and flashed like a warning signal. Leo laughed at something she said. He looked proud, not of the land, not of the legacy, of the brand. At 65, I have steady hands. Decades in emergency rooms will teach you that. You don't panic when the heart monitor spikes. You observe, you document, you wait for the right moment to act. But nothing prepares you for watching your own child plant a flag on your chest. They say blood is thicker than water. I murmured to myself, my reflection faint in the basement glass. But sometimes blood is just what blinds you to the blade pressed against your throat. Leo had told me this was temporary. We just need to leverage the equity, Mom. It's strategic, a short-term transfer. You'll structure it clean. You'll retain a life estateful right to reside. It's just paperwork. I remember the legal phrase because I asked him twice to explain it. I may be old, but I'm not careless. A life estate meant I could live here until I die, no matter what happened. That was the promise. You'll have the guest house, he'd said, smiling that boyish smile I used to kiss after Little League games. Quiet, peaceful. You deserve it. Now I live in the basement. The guest house has been gutted. Floor-to-ceiling glass. Marble countertops. Tiffany calls it the bridal prep lounge. The first time she gave me the tour, she walked ahead of me as if I were a client she tolerated. We're elevating the property, Kathleen, she said, her voice smooth but edged. It's time this place reached its potential. My husband built this barn with splintered hands. We reached our potential just fine. Outside, Leo stepped back to admire the sign. Tiffany slipped her arm through his. He didn't look toward the basement window. He didn't look toward me. That hurt more than the paperwork. The basement smells faintly of damp wood and old paint. My nursing textbooks are stacked in a corner, next to boxes labeled archive. Tiffany's handwriting. Archive. Like I'm already gone. Upstairs, laughter drifted across the field as contractors measured the lawn for a tent. I recognized the sound of a credit card machine being tested. Progress, they call it. I call it displacement. When Leo came downstairs that evening, he knocked lightly before entering as if I were a tenant. Mom, he began carefully, we need you to stay flexible these next few months. Tiffany's investors are visiting. Investors. Flexible? I asked. He avoided my eyes. Just don't make things awkward. I studied him the way I once studied patient checking for fever, for infection, for something reversible. All I saw was ambition. And fear. That night, lying on the narrow bed they'd set up near the furnace, I understood something with clinical clarity. I no longer had a son living upstairs. I had a stranger holding my deed. And strangers can be held accountable. If you've ever been made to feel like a guest in your own home, tell me below. Because what happened next wasn't luck, it was strategy. And I promise you, this story is just beginning. The night Leo asked me to sign the papers, he brought takeout from my favorite barbecue place. Sweet tea, extra napkins. He even called me Mama, the way he used to when he wanted forgiveness before committing the offense. We sat at the kitchen table under the yellow pendant light my husband installed the summer before he passed. Leo laid out the documents with rehearsed calm. It's just a transfer of title for refinancing, he said. Temporary. Well, restructure the debt. Build the wedding venue, increase the property value. You retain a life estate, so legally you can live here for the rest of your life. No one can remove you. No one. I remember tracing the phrase with my finger. Grantor retains a life estate in the property. Asterisk, as a nurse, I was trained to read consent forms carefully. You don't rush a signature when someone's body is on the line. That night my heart was the patient. What's the collateral? I asked quietly. Leo hesitated. Just a second. The land itself. But it's strategic leverage. Mom, this is how growth works. Growth. My husband used to say growth meant planting trees you wouldn't live long enough to sit under. Leo meant something else entirely. Tiffany arrived halfway through dinner, heels clicking against hardwood like a metronome counting down my hesitation. She didn't sit. She stood behind Leo, hands resting lightly on his shoulders. We're trying to build something significant here, Kathleen, she said. Not just a farm with sentimental value. Sentimental value. I signed. I told myself I was investing in my son, in his future, in the belief that blood protects blood. The guest house was supposed to be my quiet corner, a wraparound porch, a small garden, a rocking chair facing west toward the orchard. Instead, 2 weeks later, I stood in the yard as movers carried my books out of the main house. We're renovating, Tiffany said briskly. We need staging space. The bridal suite needs to feel aspirational. She picked up one of my old medical textbooks, Geriatric Care and Ethics, and flipped through it with mild amusement. Oh wow, vintage. She handed it to a mover like it was clutter. I watched box after box labeled Kathleen's storage disappear into the shed. Leo, I said softly, what's happening to the guest house? He didn't meet my eyes. Tiff has a vision for it. A vision. By the end of that month, the guest house had marble floors and a champagne bar. My rocking chair was gone. They installed keyless locks on the main house doors. For vendor security, Tiffany explained. I was given a keypad code. Temporary, she said. Then one afternoon, while I was folding laundry in what had become my basement corner, I heard Tiffany on the phone upstairs. Yes, we closed the equity line, she said. Once the crypto rebounds, we'll triple it. Crypto. My hands stilled. That evening, I asked Leo directly, you mortgaged the property? It's under control, he snapped. Don't start, Mom. Under whose name? Silence. I felt it then shift. The sterile scent of something infected. Did you use my signature? I asked carefully. His jaw tightened. You authorized me to handle things. Authorized. Not forged. Not yet. That night, I pulled the copy of the deed from my lockbox downstairs. I read every clause again. Life estate intact. On paper. But paper can be manipulated. And promises? Even easier. A week later, Tiffany stood in the old kitchen holding a stack of invitations. We're hosting our first Independence Day showcase, she said brightly. High-end clients. Investors. You'll help serve drinks. It'll look authentic. Rustic. I stared at her. Authentic? She smiled without warmth. The elderly farm matriarch. It's charming. Leo said nothing. In that moment, something inside me shifted from heartbreak to documentation. In hospitals, when neglect is suspected, you don't scream first. You gather evidence. Because what they were doing wasn't just betrayal. It was beginning to look like elder abuse. And if they had tampered with financial documents, if my name had been used without lawful consent, that wasn't family conflict. That was financial fraud. If you've ever trusted someone with your signature and later wondered what they did with it, stay with me. The 4th of July was when the masks came off. The 4th of July has always smelled like smoke and sugar, grilled corn, fireworks, fresh cut grass. This year, it smelled like humiliation. By noon, the driveway was lined with luxury SUVs. White tents stretched across the pasture where my husband once let Leo chase fireflies. Crystal glasses caught the sun like tiny explosions. A string quartet tuned their instruments beneath the oak tree that holds my husband's ashes. Tiffany had curated patriotism into a brand. Red, white, and revenue. I heard her joke to a guest in linen slacks. She handed me a tray of champagne flutes. Circulate, she said lightly, and smile. It sells the story. The story? I asked. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp and expensive. That we're preserving tradition. Preserving. I walked into the crowd, steady as I used to be when delivering bad news to families in her corridors. Calm. Observant. A woman in oversized sunglasses took a flute from my tray. Oh, how sweet, she said. Is she the caretaker? Tiffany laughed before I could answer. She's part of the property, she said. Comes with the charm. Laughter rippled. My grip tightened around the tray, but my face remained neutral. Nurses learn early. Emotion clouds assessment. Leo stood near the barn entrance, discussing projected returns with two men in tailored suits. Once we scale the venue model, well, franchise, he said. This is just phase one. One of the men gestured toward me. And the previous owner? Leo didn't look at me. Family arrangement, he replied smoothly. All legally structured. Legally structured. The words echoed. Later, as the sun began to dip, Tiffany clinked her glass to gather attention. We're so grateful to share this special preview of our luxury wedding destination, she announced. A space where legacy meets lifestyle. Legacy. She motioned toward me. And of course, we couldn't do it without Kathleen. She's been accommodating. The pause was deliberate. I felt every act turn toward my silver hair, my sensible shoes, the tray in my hands. Tiffany stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate, loud enough for others to hear. You're lucky, you know, she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. Most women your age would be in assisted living. You get to stay. Stay. As what? I asked quietly. She tilted her head. As long as you don't make things difficult. The quartet resumed playing. Fireworks cracked in the distance from neighboring farms. One of Tiffany's friends, already flushed with alcohol, studied me openly. I love her hair, she said. So authentic, very farmhouse. Don't encourage her, Tiffany replied. She refuses to modernize. The group laughed. My son stood 5 feet away. 5 feet. He didn't interrupt, didn't correct, didn't even wince. I watched his profile, searching for the boy who once cried when he scraped his knee. The boy who used to call me from college just to hear my voice. Instead, I saw a man calculating optics. After sunset, Tiffany cornered me near the catering table. Tomorrow, she said coolly, we'll need the basement cleared further. Some of your old paperwork is in the way. That paperwork includes my pension records, I replied. She shrugged. Clutter invites accidents. Then she leaned in, her voice stripped of performance. You're not the matriarch anymore, she whispered. You're a guest, a lucky one. Something inside me went still, not shattered, not broken, still. In medicine, there's a moment when you realize the patient isn't stable or deteriorating. That's when protocol changes. That night, after the guests left and the last firework faded, I sat on my narrow basement bed and understood with clinical precision. I no longer had a son upstairs. I had a liability, and liability demands documentation. If someone has ever reduced you to a prop in your own life, tell me what did you do next? Because the next move I made wasn't emotional. It was strategic. The black sedan pulled up just after 9 the next morning. I was at the sink in the basement bathroom, rinsing out a coffee mug, when I heard the gravel shift under unfamiliar tires. Not the rumble of contractors, not Tiffany's impatient acceleration. This was deliberate, smooth. Through the small window, I saw polished shoes step onto my driveway. Elena always did walk with purpose. 5 years ago, she left this farm with a single suitcase and a spine made of steel. Leo had called her too ambitious. Tiffany called her intimidating. I called her brave. She stepped out in a tailored navy suit, hair pulled back, sunlight catching the gold at her collar. For a moment, she stood still, taking in the sign, the tents half dismantled, the new landscaping that erased decades of memory. Then she saw me at the window and smiled. I climbed the basement stairs slowly, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to measure the moment. Tiffany opened the front door before I could reach it. Yes, she said, already irritated. Elena removed her sunglasses. I'm here to see Kathleen. The temperature shifted. Leo appeared behind Tiffany, confusion flashing across his face. Elena, he said, what are you doing here? She didn't look at him. I'm here for my mother, she said calmly. Mother. The word landed heavier than I expected. Tiffany crossed her arms. I think you're confused. No, Elena replied evenly. I'm very clear. She stepped past them without waiting for permission and met me halfway down the hallway. Up close, I could see the confidence in her posture. Not arrogance. Authority. You look thinner, she said softly to me, not as criticism, as assessment. I've been busy, I answered. Her hand slipped into mine, warm, steady. I know, she said. Leo cleared his throat. Elena, whatever this is, it's a consultation, she interrupted. Pro bono. Tiffany laughed sharply. Consultation for what? She signed everything willingly. Elena turned, her expression composed. That's what we're going to clarify. We sat at the dining table in the old table, now rebranded as a tasting station. Elena opened a leather briefcase and removed documents with surgical precision. I've recently been promoted to senior counsel at my firm, she said lightly. I now specialize in elder law and fiduciary litigation. Tiffany's smile faltered just slightly. Leo shifted in his seat. Mom doesn't need a lawyer. Elena met his eyes for the first time. Every person with a life estate needs protection if the remainder holder begins encumbering the property without lawful consent. Silence. She placed a copy of the deed on the table. Did you obtain her informed consent before leveraging the equity? Leo swallowed. She trusted me. That's not a legal standard, Elena replied. I watched Tiffany's jaw tighten. We haven't done anything illegal, she said. Elena tilted her head. Then you won't mind a forensic review. The air felt electric. 5 years ago, when Elena and Leo divorced, he accused her of choosing career over family. What he never knew was that for the past 5 years, I had been quietly wiring a portion of my savings to cover her final semesters of law school. She tried to refuse. I'm not your responsibility, she told me back then. You're my investment, I answered. Not in money, in integrity. Nah, sitting at this table, I saw the return. Elena reached into her briefcase again and handed me a business card embossed in gold. Mom, she said gently, my first case after promotion will be yours. Tiffany scoffed. You're being dramatic. Elena's gaze sharpened. Elder abuse statutes in the state are not dramatic, she said. They're enforceable. Leo looked between us, uneasy. Mom, this is unnecessary. I felt something steady rise in my chest in anger. Clarity. For the first time in months, I said quietly, I feel necessary. Elena squeezed my hand. We start by reviewing every financial instrument executed after the transfer, she said. If any document bears your signature without verifiable consent, we escalate. Escalate. Tiffany stood abruptly. This is harassment. No, Elena replied calmly. This is accountability. As she packed her files, she leaned close to me. Play along for now, she whispered. Let them underestimate you. I nodded. I had spent 35 years watching patients pretend to be stronger than they were. Now, I would pretend to be weaker. If someone unexpected has ever shown up for you, when blood failed, tell me, would you let them fight beside you? Because the next move required patience and proof. In nursing, when you suspect neglect, you don't accuse first. You observe patterns, missed medications, unexplained bruises, inconsistent documentation. You let the truth reveal itself in repetition. That's exactly what Elena told me to do. Don't confront, she said over the phone that night. Collect. So I became smaller, slower, a little forgetful. I left cabinet doors slightly open. Asked Tiffany to repeat herself. Let my shoulders curve inward when she spoke to me. Predators relax when prey appears compliant. The first thing Elena had me do was order to small security cameras, online Nest cams, discreet, motion activated. I paid in cash for my pension withdrawal, so there would be no digital trail connecting the purchase to the farm accounts. I installed one behind the old smoke detector in the basement. The second I hid inside a hollowed-out gardening book on the shelf Tiffany never bothered to touch. She never imagined I understood technology. The footage began collecting within hours. Day 1, Tiffany entering the basement unannounced, unplugging the small refrigerator where I kept groceries. She doesn't need all this, she muttered. It's wasteful. Day 2, Leo reviewing paperwork at the basement desk, me desk flipping through folders marked insurance and pension. Mom doesn't track this stuff, he said casually to Tiffany. We can consolidate. Consolidate. I documented everything in a small spiral notebook, just like I used to chart patient vitals. Date, time, behavior. Then came the breakthrough. 3 days later, I pretended to nap on the basement cot while Tiffany took a phone call upstairs. She must have assumed I was asleep. Her voice carried through the vents. Yes, the equity line closed, she said. We used her credit history to secure better terms. Leo had power of attorney for transactional purposes. I felt my pulse slow instead of spite. Power of attorney. I had never signed one. She didn't even read it, Tiffany added with a laugh. Older people just want to trust their kids. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from confirmation. That evening, Leo came downstairs holding a document. Mom, he said carefully, we need you to initial this acknowledgement for the bank. Routine compliance. I squinted at the page as if confused. I don't understand this, I murmured. It's just affirming you waived the life estate clause in exchange for financial restructuring. Waived. The word landed like a diagnosis. I thought I kept that, I said weakly. You did, he replied quickly. This is just technical language. I let my hand hover over the pen. Then I coughed softly and set it down. I'm tired, I said. Tomorrow. His jaw tightened. Later that night, I reviewed the footage. There it was, clear as a heart monitor spite. Leo at the desk weeks earlier, practicing my signature on a blank sheet of paper. Again and again, then scanning a document into the printer. Forgery, not misunderstanding, not miscommunication. Financial fraud, by federal definition, knowingly executing a scheme to obtain property through false representation. I felt no hysteria, only a nurse's steadiness. The next morning, I intentionally left my notebook visible on the basement table, half open. Date. Tiffany found it by noon. What is this? She demanded, flipping through pages filled with dates and notes. Oh, I said mildly, just keeping track of my memory. Her eyes narrowed. Are you accusing us of something? I blinked slowly. Should I be? She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. Don't forget who owns this house. I held her gaze. No, I said quietly. I haven't. That night, I sent Elena the video file. Her response came within minutes. This escalates to criminal, she wrote. Elder abuse and financial fraud. We proceed. For the first time since moving into the basement, I slept without waking. If you've ever had to pretend to be weaker to protect yourself, tell me, did it cost you your pride, or did it sharpen your strength? Because the next step wouldn't be quiet. It would be legal. Greed has a blind spot. It believes possession equals power. It confuses holding the deed with owning the truth. Elena chose her timing carefully. We don't storm the house yet, she told me. We let them feel untouchable. 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived. Tiffany signed for it with theatrical annoyance. What nah? She muttered, tearing it open at the kitchen island. Leo leaned over her shoulder. I watched from the doorway, quiet as wallpaper. Elena's letter had gleamed at the top of the page. Notice of demand for accounting and asset review. Asterisk, Tiffany laughed. This is intimidation, she scoffed. She's fishing. Leo skimmed quickly. She's requesting full disclosure of all encumbrances, refinancing instruments, equity withdrawals, and any executed waiver of life estate. His voice stumbled on the last phrase. Waiver. Tiffany waved the paper dismissively. We hold the deed. The title is in your name. She's just an occupant. An occupant. I folded my hands loosely in front of me. Elena had anticipated this reaction. In property law, a life estate is not sentimental. It is enforceable. It grants the holder exclusive right to occupy and benefit from the property until death. It cannot be extinguished without lawful, informed, and voluntary relinquishment. And any forged relinquishment that crosses from civil dispute into criminal fraud. Should we respond? Leo asked, unease creeping into his tone. Tiffany poured herself sparkling water. We ignore it. She has no leverage. They were wrong. Elena wasn't asking for permission. She was establishing a record. 3 days later, a second notice arrived, this time from the bank. Request for verification of borrower authorization regarding the recent home equity line of credit. Tiffany's composure cracked for a fraction of a second. They're auditing, Leo said. Routine, she insisted, though her voice had sharpened. What they didn't know they couldn't see is that Elena had already contacted the lender's fraud investigation unit. She had submitted preliminary evidence, video footage of signature practice, timeline discrepancies, absence of a notarized power of attorney. Forgery involving real property instruments can trigger federal scrutiny when interstate financial systems are used. Crypto transfers, that widened jurisdiction. That evening, Leo came downstairs. "Mom," he said carefully, "did you talk to the bank?" I looked up from my knitting. "I talked to a lot of people," I replied gently. "At my age, conversation is free. This is getting out of hand," he snapped. "You're jeopardizing everything." "Everything?" I asked. "Or the equity?" He ran a hand through his hair. "You don't understand business." I studied him the way I once studied trauma patients searching for underlying cause. "No," I said quietly. "I understand consent." His silence told me he understood too. Upstairs, Tiffany paced while speaking on the phone. "If this turns into an elder abuse allegation, investors will panic," she hissed. "We need to close the summer contracts before anything formal happens." There it was. Not remorse. Exposure risk. The next morning, a process server arrived. Elena's next move. Formal notice of intent to file civil action alleging financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Tiffany's hand trembled as she signed. "This is absurd," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Leo stared at the paper like it might rearrange itself into something less dangerous. "Mom wouldn't do this," he whispered. I stepped into the room. "I already have," I said calmly. For a moment, no one spoke. Greed had believed I was isolated. Greed hadn't accounted for strategy. If someone ever assumed you were powerless because you stayed quiet, tell me, did you surprise them? Because the next knock on that door wouldn't be a letter. It would be authority. The knock came at 8:12 am firm, measured, not the impatient pounding of a delivery driver or the casual tap of a neighbor. Authority has a rhythm. Tiffany froze mid-sip of her espresso. Leo looked up from his laptop, confusion flickering across his face. I was already standing. Through the glass pane of the front door, I saw Elena's reflection beside two uniformed sheriff's deputies and a man in a navy blazer holding a leather portfolio. Professional. Controlled. Tiffany opened the door with a brittle smile. "Can I help you?" One of the deputies spoke evenly. "We're here to execute a civil inspection order and serve notice regarding allegations of financial exploitation and elder abuse." The word abuse sliced cleanly through the morning air. Leo stood abruptly. "This is a misunderstanding." Elena stepped forward, calm as a surgeon entering an operating room. "No," she said. "It's documentation." She met my eyes briefly with steady reassurance before addressing them again. "Under state statute concerning elder abuse and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, we are authorized to review financial records and property instruments executed within the past 18 months. Additionally, the court has granted temporary injunctive relief, preventing further encumbrance of the property pending investigation." Tiffany's color drained. "You can't just walk into our home," she snapped. Elena's voice sharpened and it loud, but precise. "The property is subject to a life estate held by Kathleen. Any action impairing her possessory rights without lawful waiver is actionable. We're here to verify whether such impairment occurred through fraudulent means." The man in the blazer stepped forward. "I'm a certified forensic accountant retained for preliminary review." Leo's jaw clenched. "Mom, tell them this isn't necessary." I looked at him carefully. "When you were 6, I said quietly, you used to hide broken toes behind the barn instead of telling me they were damaged. You thought if I didn't see them, they weren't broken." He flinched. "This isn't the same," he muttered. "No," I agreed. "It's worse." The deputies entered, respectful but firm. One remained near the doorway. The other requested access to the home office. Tiffany tried to block the hall. "This is harassment," she insisted. She signed everything voluntarily. Elena lifted a slim folder. "We have video evidence of signature simulation," she said. "An absence of notarized power of attorney. If any document purporting to waive the life estate bears a forged signature, that constitutes financial fraud under federal statute." The word federal hung heavily. Leo's confidence cracked visibly. The forensic accountant began reviewing files on Leo's laptop, while the deputy photographed stacks of financial documents. "What are you looking for?" Tiffany demanded. Discrepancies, Elena replied. Unauthorized equity withdrawals. Transfers into cryptocurrency exchanges. Any transaction inconsistent with fiduciary duty. Fiduciary duty. That was the naff twist. Because when a son handles a mother's financial affairs, the law expects loyalty, not leverage. I stood quietly as they worked, feeling the strange calm of a nurse in crisis mode. Chaos doesn't frighten you when you understand anatomy. Tiffany's voice rose. She's manipulating you. She's old and confused. Elena turned slowly. Accusing a woman of diminished capacity while simultaneously using her credit history to secure loans is not a strong defense. Silence. The deputy approached Leo. Sir, we'll need copies of all documents relating to the refinancing. Leo looked at Menet as an adversary now, but as someone realizing the floor beneath him was not solid. Mom, he whispered, you're destroying us. I met his eyes steadily. No, I said. You did that when you mistook access for ownership. Elena closed her portfolio. This is just the beginning, she said evenly. Next step is formal filing. Tiffany's bravado had dissolved into something brittle and frightened. For the first time since that wedding sign went into the soil, I felt air return to my lungs. If someone ever underestimated your resolve because of your age, tell Mehdi you let them? Or did you remind them that quiet strength can still summon a storm? The courtroom smelled like polished wood and restrained panic, not the dramatic kind you see on television. No shouting, no theatrics, just tension stretched thin enough to hum. Elena sat beside me at the petitioner's table, her posture composed, a stack of exhibits arranged with meticulous order. Across the aisle, Leo avoided my eyes. Tiffany stared straight ahead, jaw tight, as if defiance alone could reverse evidence. The hearing was preliminary in emergency motion to invalidate the alleged waiver of my life estate and to freeze enforcement of the home equity debt pending fraud review. But preliminary does not mean powerless. Elena stood when the judge entered. Your Honor, she began, voice steady. We present evidence indicating that the respondent executed financial instruments and a purported life estate relinquishment without the informed and voluntary consent of the grantor, Kathleen. She clicked a remote. The first exhibit appeared on the courtroom screen. Video footage. Leo at the basement desk, practicing my signature. Again and again. The room went still. Tiffany shifted sharply. That proves nothing. The judge lifted a hand. You'll have your turn. Elena continued. We will also show that the respondent used Kathleen's credit history and property interest to secure a home equity line of credit, the proceeds of which were diverted into high-risk cryptocurrency investments. The forensic accountant testified next, outlining the transaction trail. Funds withdrawn. Accounts opened. Transfers routed through exchanges. Were these transactions consistent with ordinary estate management? Elena asked. No, he replied. They reflect speculative investment behavior inconsistent with fiduciary duty. Fiduciary duty, the obligation to act in another's best interest. A son's moral duty had failed long before the legal one did. Then came the second video. Tiffany's voice, clear as daylight. She didn't even read it. Older people just want to trust their kids. A murmur rippled through the gallery, and then the third clip. Tiffany leaning close to me in the kitchen. You're not the matriarch anymore. You're a guest, a lucky one. On screen, my posture looked smaller than I remembered. In person, I felt taller. Tiffany's attorney attempted recovery. This is a family dispute, he argued, not criminal conduct. Elena's response was surgical. When a vulnerable adult's signature is forged to obtain financial leverage that exceeds family disagreement, it constitutes financial fraud. When her housing stability is threatened to coerce compliance that implicates elder abuse statutes. She paused deliberately. And when an attempted waiver of a life estate lacks valid consent, it is void ab initio valid from the outset. The judge studied the documents. Did the petitioner ever execute a notarized power of attorney? He asked. No, Your Honor, Elena replied. Leo's attorney shuffled papers nervously. The judge turned to Leo. Did you obtain explicit written authorization to waive your mother's life estate? Leo opened his mouth, closed it. Silence answered for him. After a brief recess, the judge returned. Preliminary review supports substantial likelihood of fraudulent execution. The alleged waiver of life estate is hereby declared invalid pending full adjudication. Enforcement of the home equity line of credit against the property is temporarily stayed. A stay. The farm would not be seized. Not today. But the judge wasn't finished. The court further refers this matter for investigation under state elder abuse statutes and potential federal financial fraud violations. Tiffany's composure cracked completely. "This is outrageous," she whispered. No one responded. For the first time since this began, the narrative shifted publicly. Not sentimental mother, not dramatic divorce, legal violation. When the hearing adjourned, Leo finally looked at me. "Mom," he said hoarsely, "I never meant intent doesn't erase impact," I replied quietly. Outside the courthouse, cameras from a local business journal snapped photos. Investors had already begun withdrawing from the wedding venture. Greed's blind spot had met daylight. If someone ever tried to write your story as weakness, tell me, did you let the record stand? Or did you demand correction? Because the final ruling was still coming, and justice, like harvest, takes time. Autumn arrived with a kind of quiet authority. The orchard turned gold first, then amber, then a red so deep it felt almost defiant. By the time the final hearing came, the wedding sign had already been removed. Not by me, by the bank. When investors withdrew and the fraud investigation formalized, the venue collapsed faster than it had risen. Contracts dissolved. Vendors filed claims. The illusion evaporated under scrutiny. Inside the courtroom, there was no spectacle this time, only resolution. Elena stood beside me as the judge reviewed the final findings, confirmed forgery of my signature on the purported life estate waiver, unauthorized encumbrance of the property, breach of fiduciary duty, and substantiated elements of financial exploitation under state elder abuse statutes. Leo stared at the table. Tiffany no longer looked composed. She looked tired. "The court finds," the judge began, "that the petitioner's life estate remains fully intact and enforceable. The transfer of financial authority executed without valid consent is void. The home equity debt secured through fraudulent representation is not enforceable against the petitioner's interest." My lungs filled completely for what felt like the first time in months. The property title is restored to reflect sole ownership interest of Kathleen, subject only to her retained life estate rights as originally structured. The respondents are ordered to vacate the premises within 30 days and to make restitution for funds obtained through fraudulent means. Restitution. Accountability written in ink. Leo's attorney whispered something urgently, but Leo was no longer listening. He stood abruptly as the judge rose to leave. "Mom," he said, voice breaking, "please." The courtroom emptied slowly. Elena remained still beside me, steady as always. Leo crossed the aisle. For a moment, I saw not the man who forged my name, but the boy who once ran through these fields with grass stains on his knees. He dropped to his knees in front of me. "Mom," he whispered, "I made mistakes. I was trying to build something. I thought you'd understand. I'm your son. I'm your blood." Blood. I looked down at him carefully. "Yes," I said. "You are." Tiffany stood several feet away, arms wrapped around herself, silent for once. "But blood," I continued quietly, "is biology. Family is behavior." Leo's shoulders shook. "I can fix this," he insisted. "We can fix this." I felt no triumph, no vengeance, only clarity. "When you used my name without my consent," I said, "you didn't just risk the farm. You erased me." He covered his face. I turned slightly, reaching for Elena's hand. "Elena," I said gently, "is not my blood." Leo looked up. "But she chose me," I continued. "And I chose her." Elena squeezed my fingers. "You taught me integrity," she said softly. "You paid for my education when you didn't have to. You never treated me as disposable." Disposable. The word hung between us. I looked at Leo one last time. "I forgive you," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean restoration." The deputies later escorted them off the property after the 30-day order expired. Tiffany left without looking back. Leo paused at the edge of the orchard, staring at the trees as if seeing them for the first time. Then he walked away. That evening, Elena and I stood on the porch as the sun dipped low over the fields. The air smelled like apples and wood smoke. "It's yours again," she said. I shook my head gently. "It was always mine," I replied. "I just had to remind them. If someone who shares your DNA betrayed you, and someone unrelated stood beside you instead, would you call family? Because sometimes love turns strangers into blood, and sometimes greed turns blood into strangers." The first morning after they left, the house sounded different, not quieter, lighter. I woke before sunrise out of habit, wrapped a cardigan around my shoulders, and climbed the porch steps slowly, not because I needed to, but because I could. No keypad code, no hesitation. The front door opened to the orchard glowing in soft gold. Dew clung to the grass like glass beads. The sign was gone. The marble counters in the guest house had already been scheduled for removal. Elena insisted on restoring the porch swing. "Legacy isn't staging," she told me. "It's stewardship." We sat together on the steps with 2 mugs of tea warming our hands. For months, I had lived like a chartered patient, monitored, minimized, evaluated for usefulness. Now the air felt unmeasured. "Are you angry?" Elena asked gently. I considered the question the way I used to assess pain levels. I admitted. But anger is acute. It specks. Then it fades. And now I'm awake. She smiled faintly. "The criminal investigation remains ongoing. Federal review takes time. Paper trails stretch longer than family trees. But the civil ruling stands firm, my life estate intact. Title corrected. Restitution ordered. The law did what love failed to do. It drew boundaries. Inside the barn, I found one of Leo's old baseball gloves tucked in a dusty box. I held it for a long time. Forgiveness came easier than I expected. Trusted not. I mailed him a letter a week later. No accusations. No lectures. Just one sentence. "You are welcome to visit when you are ready to respect the door you walk through." Some might call that cold. I call it clear. Elena now spends weekends here drafting policy proposals for expanded elder protection statutes. She says my case revealed systemic gaps show easily financial exploitation hides behind family loyalty. "You didn't just win your farm back," she told me yesterday. "You strengthened precedent." I laughed softly. All I wanted was my porch. But maybe she's right. Maybe survival becomes legacy when you refuse silence. This afternoon, we replanted the garden behind the guest house. No champagne bar, no glass walls, just soil and seedlings. As I pressed my hands into the dirt, I felt something settle inside me at triumph. Rootedness. I used to believe blood guaranteed loyalty. Now I know better. Money can distort affection. Ambition can disguise exploitation. And sometimes the most dangerous betrayal arrives wearing your child's face. But love, a chosen love, can rebuild what greed tried to fracture. I am 65 years old. I am not disposable. I am not a prop. I am Kathleen. And this land, this porch, this harvest, are not symbols of victory. They are proof that dignity is enforceable. If you were Elena, would you have come back for a mother-in-law who wasn't your blood? And if you were me, would you have fought or stayed silent to keep the peace? Tell me below. Who is the family you chose when blood failed you? Because sometimes love makes strangers into kin, and sometimes protecting yourself is the most loving act of all.